Everybody, my name is Corey Paulson. I am the head of civics education here at TVW. Some of you already know me. Some of you are returners to our program. Thank you so much for being here. And then some of you are new to our program. And so essentially, I'm going to start sharing my screen here in a second, and then we'll talk through the agenda and what we're going to be doing here today. So what we're going to be doing today is welcome, of course. Thanks so much for coming here. I know it's the end of your work day after the kids have all gone. It's the end of my work day too. So we'll make the most of our time here. But if you could put in the chat or just kind of your school, it'll already say your name, obviously, what grade you teach and whether you're new or whether you're a returner, kind of gives me a guideline of kind of what we're doing. Our agenda for today is we're going to talk about what to expect in this year's legislative session to start off with. I pay a lot of attention to what's going on in the legislature and in Washington state government. I don't expect that everybody pays quite as much attention as I do. So I'm going to give you a little heads up on what to expect in this year's legislative session. We'll do a quick overview of the Capital Classroom program. Most of you are familiar with it, whether you're a returner or if you're new, you're here for a reason. So at least you know something about our program. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our new things that we're bringing into this year, and then go through some more details of the Capital Classroom program, which is going to be especially helpful for those of you who are new to the program. But then those of you who are more familiar with the program, I have some more ideas for you as you implement the program with your students. And then theoretically, there'll be time for a Q&A at the end, or if you have any questions as we're going through, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand or your digital hand. You all know how Zoom works. Right, we all taught through COVID. Well, at least I did. And so I remember all the digital, hands, please raise them as we're going through. So that's what we're going with now. My cohort here, Jessica is here. She's our assistant at Teach with TVW. As part of our program, you'll probably get a bunch of emails from either me or Jessica about things that are happening. And so just kind of keep our names in mind. So here we go. All right, so what to expect in this year's legislative session? There's a lot going on. I mean, of course, we know that the federal government shut down today. Will it be open by January? I don't know. Nobody's telling me. And the governor certainly isn't telling me. He's still out of town. And so we don't really know so far. But some of the things we do know about Washington State that are going to definitely play in. Sounds good, Lisa. Thanks for showing up. This part is going to be important then. What we definitely know is that the results of the November election, there are 5 different seats that are open because of a special election this year. And that could change the dynamics, especially of the Democratic majority within the legislature. And so as we're writing a supplemental budget this year, it's going to be really impactful. The race that, if you're paying attention to legislative races at all for yourself or with your students, that is going to be very interesting is the 26th legislative district between Krishna Dawson and Caldeer. Caldeer's a Republican, and Krishna Dawson she has to run for her seat right now. She got appointed, and it's looking pretty close. And so the Democrats could lose a seat in the Senate, and the Republicans could gain a seat there. We'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting election as for that particular seat. The 5th district also has a special election between Victoria Hunt, who was appointed to fill Senator Ramos's seat when, unfortunately, when he died last year. She was in the House, and now she was appointed to be in the Senate. But former legislator Chad Mogendas is running against her as the Republican running there. He was just endorsed by the Seattle Times. So that, I think, will also be an interesting race to follow for the 5th legislative district. That's like Issaquah. And then the other kind of more interesting competitive race is actually between 2 Democrats in the 48th district. And that's between Amy Wallen and Vandana Slatter. And they're both in the legislature now, but they're running against one another. And you have Slatter, who's more of the seen as more of the progressive Democrat, and Wallen is more of the kind of moderate Democrat. It'll be an interesting thing to see what happens with that race, and again, how those Democratic majorities are going to shift in the legislature this year. So that'll be something that throughout the program that you can talk to your lobbyist and talk with your students about, because the Democrats have a vast majority. That's not going to change, but the progressives versus the moderate Republican Democrats is something that you can really discuss with your students in kind of a safe way within the classroom, kind of staying a little bit away from the federal stuff, to then talk about parties and kind of how they shift in terms of their liberal to conservative. Some of the other things that are going to you can expect is to figure out what the governor is thinking. There's the governor, in contrast to previous governors, is pretty closed booked. So he's not really telling us a lot about what his priorities are, what he's doing, what bills he's in favor of. Last session, you didn't really find out until the very end, until he signed bills, what he was going to do. Previous governors have given a lot more press conferences and done a lot more indications on what they're going to do. And so since this is now Governor Ferguson's second session, it'll be interesting to see whether he changes that style or not. And I think that's another really interesting thing to talk with students about, is kind of the style of governing and how Governor Ferguson is presenting himself to both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and how he's dealing with his own state in contrast with how he's dealing with the feds. Governor Ferguson, of course, was also really impactful during the first Trump administration. And so you could see the difference in how he put himself off as Attorney General and how he is displaying himself as governor. That's another really interesting thing to talk with your students about. And there's tons of press conferences that you could watch from his time as Attorney General on TVW, and they're all still right there. Of course, the other big thing that's going to be on everyone's mind is the budget. This is a supplementary budget year, meaning that, so they passed the big fat budget last year. Some of the taxes that they passed are currently held up in court. So to see whether those taxes are even going to be implementable, and then that funds, being able to be used, will be something to pay attention to. Of course, the federal impact of the money coming in is also going to impact how we write our supplemental budget. So that will be something to really pay attention to in terms of budgetary impacts. And we have a lot of videos that talk about budgets and how they work and what they mean in a pretty simple and easy way for students to understand as well, because the budget can be really complicated. I went to the bill signing of the budget last session, and it was like this thick, like the budget itself. It was crazy. And that was just the operating budget. And then you have the transportation budget that was like this thick, and the capital budget also this thick. So it was crazy. And then some of the other things that you can expect in this year's legislative session are initiatives to the legislature. This is all determined on whether these initiatives get enough of public signature. You need like 306,000 individuals to sign the initiatives for them to even get to the legislature. They have not reached this threshold yet, but these are the three that people are talking about right now. One is they're all sponsored by Republicans. And one is to increase voter ID requirements. One is to limit transgender students in youth sports. And another one is to repeal the parental rights bill that was passed last session that amended the initiative that they passed the previous session. And so those three initiatives, if they do get enough signatures, will definitely be part of the discussion. And I think the ones that students would be really interested in, and will be kind of at the forefront, but we won't know until January about whether they have enough signatures or not. So also just initiatives in general are interesting to talk about. We also have a pretty good 10-minute video on initiatives that talks about how they work and how you get them on the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. Lisa, you're nodding. That means that you've watched that video, and that makes me so happy. I was just talking to the constitutional scholar, Hugh Spitzer, this morning about the work that he's doing at UW, so it was pretty cool. And then the last thing that you're going to see is on our ballot in November, and you can talk to your students about this, is there's going to be a constitutional amendment on the ballot. It did pass through the legislature last year. And so now our Constitution says that now it has to go on the ballot and it needs to be approved by the people. And that's whether to have our long-term care funds that we're all paying now, whether the government can put them into the stock market or not. Now, this might not be super interesting to your students. One of the highlights, I think, to talk to your students about it, because I don't think they're really thinking about whether they're going to go into nursing homes, like, when they're older. But one of the interesting things about this one is that it's not very partisan. You have Republicans who are against it and Republicans who are for it, and vice versa, Democrats who are against it and Democrats who are for it. So it's an interesting way to talk about an issue without getting into partisan politics at all. And we'll see how that goes. So that's something that you'll see on our November ballot. So you can talk about that ahead of time. So those are some of the things that I think will come to really fruition in this year's legislative session, in addition to education funds and the environment and anything that your students are interested in. There's likely going to be bills that are put forward on those. The one thing that I would encourage your students, and when you're talking about legislation that they want to sponsor or they want to be a part of, is whether it's going to cost a lot of money or not, because Washington State does not have a lot of money right now. So anything that costs a lot of money is going to be hard to get past. And we don't want students sponsoring bills that they can't, that don't make it through committees, because that's really disheartening. So the quick overview of our Capital Classroom program, just as a reminder, and again, you're all here for a reason. I was a Capital Classroom teacher for 10 years before I moved to TVW to help implement the Capital Classroom program. But before the legislative session, we're moving into a short session, so only 60 days. What you could do with your students is learn about who your representatives are at your school or in your district. And kind of what the duties are of the legislature, like what do they do? And then during session, you will meet with a lobbyist. You'll conduct kind of 6 meetings over Zoom. You'll pick a topic that you're interested in. Your lobbyist will help you pick bills that are within that topic. They will help you pick bills that actually have legs, they say, the lobbyist term, so they're going to go farther than just dying right away. And then throughout the legislative session, your students can do research on the bill topic, formulating their own opinions. They can listen to public testimony. They can make their own public testimony. And because of COVID, right now there's virtual testimony available. So you don't have to come to Olympia, although I totally recommend it if you can make it down here to make testimony, although it's hard because they don't often tell you when the bill is going to come up for testimony until like the day before or 2 days before. It's a little challenging to get a school bus at that point in time. So the virtual testimony can be really helpful. Your lobbyist can help your students if they really like a bill. There's this like one part that they're like, oh, but I hate that part. They can help you write amendments to that bill and submit those amendments and show you how that's done. And then also throughout these meetings, we can meet with stakeholders like executive branch members who sponsors the bill or for the bill, legislators who are for and against the bill, which is something I'll talk about later, community members, advocacy groups, things like that, so that your students are really getting a holistic picture of this issue and how it's moving through the legislature. That's kind of the quick overview. So this year, we're being really cognizant and very, very aware of wanting to make this program work for whatever your classroom is like. All teachers have different goals for what you want your students to get out of this. Do you want your students to understand that there's other roles in government than just being a legislator? That lobbyist is like an option that someone could go in to do. So maybe you just want this Capital Classroom program to be just something about what does a lobbyist do? How do they do their work? That could work. Maybe you really want your students looking at legislation in particular and learning how to read a bill in particular. Then you can talk to your lobbyist and say, I really want them to understand governmental legislation and language, and they can help you with that. Maybe you have students who are really interested in finances and budget, and they really want to understand how the budget works and look at the fiscal notes and all of that nonsense. It's not nonsense, it's actually pretty important, but you know what I mean. Then the lobbyists can help them do that because they are experts in this. And so we're bringing this expert to you. So we want to offer a pre-session, so in December, goal setting meeting with your lobbyist, where you can say, you know, my students cannot handle it if you talk for more than 4 minutes without taking a break. That's good for the lobbyists to know so that they can plan, because they're not teachers, right? They're lobbyists. And so that they can plan how their 30-minute session can go. You can also talk to them about what your goals are for this capital classroom, because it's very flexible. I'll be in on those meetings, or Jess will be in on those meetings, so that we can take those down, and then we'll be following up. We'll be at all of your capital classroom meetings as we run the Zooms, and then we can continue to follow up to make sure that you, the teachers, and you, the students, are getting everything you need out of this program. So it's pretty flexible in that way. The other thing that we're really providing this year, our department has grown, is extra support from the teach team. So that's us. There's 4 of us in the team, with public hearings. Maybe you want a pro and a con testimony on your bill, but you don't have time to go through TVW and clip it all down and find them. Tell us what you need. We will do that for you, and we will send it out to you, so that you can then show those to your students and have those discussions. You just have to ask us for it, right? And then we will do those things for you. All of those extra kind of things, that's what our job is and what we really want to provide for you, so that extra support. Floor debates also are really challenging to find sometimes on TVW, but they're all recorded, but they can be hard to find, and they're often very long, especially when you go to the end of session. Sometimes these floor debates go on until like midnight. They're like 8 hours long. We kind of have the skills and the experience to scrub through those 8 hours and find the piece that you want. So asking us for those can be really helpful. And then the biggie, guests. We're really focused on bringing special guests into your classroom at least once over the session. So again, these guests could be, stakeholders. So those are advocacy groups. Those are people who are really advocating for this particular piece of legislation. We were talking about, like, a couple of years ago, we were following this beaver bill about that beaver should be the keystone, labeled a keystone species, and therefore get more funding and things like that. Hi, Jennifer. And so we brought in someone from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife to talk to students and talk about why that would be important. That's another guest that we want to bring in. In Jennifer's class last year, we brought in a congressperson to talk about different things. We want to bring in the opposition to the legislation to your classroom. We want your students to hear from the people who are against the bill and why, and have them really ask questions, especially if your students are like really for the bill. We want them to really hear what the other side is saying, what kind of opposition they're having. So we want to bring those in. We want to bring in the prime sponsors of the bill or your own legislators. In order to do this, and this is where I do my big plug, you have to have your students sign the waivers, because we record these programs, and in order to be able to record them, and the legislators are a part of them, your students need to sign the waivers. So we send out the waivers at the beginning of the year. If you do have students who are like, no, we don't want to be recorded, and every classroom has one of those, which is fine. You just need to let us know who they are, and then we can blur them out or ask them to sit kind of on the side, so that then it's not like the one person who can't be on screen, like right in front of the camera. That could be a little bit problematic. So some of our new people, we do send you a camera and a microphone and all the things that you need to make this program run, like the nice microphone so it can pick up all around the whole classroom, as well as a wide camera lens so it can take the whole classroom. So I didn't say that earlier. So those are some of the new opportunities that we really want to make sure that people take advantage of, because they just make the program so much better. And sometimes we can even get people to come out to your school In addition, this was, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were following the bill that made smoking and vaping go up to 21 in Washington State. This was like in 2019, maybe. And the Attorney General, who's now the governor, came out to my school and talked to my students about this bill because he was like sponsoring the bill. So that was really cool. And so those sorts of opportunities are there if you ask us for them. I mean, they're not always there. I can't always get the Attorney General, especially not right now. But we can certainly ask those questions. Right now, the Attorney General's seemingly very busy. So now's where I just kind of want to get into some of the details on each of the sessions as we're going through. So I'm going to kind of talk some of the details here, but of each week as we're going through the legislative session. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and Jess will let me know if they're there because I can't see it well. I have both of my screens up. But so pre-session, we're going to pair you with your lobbyist. That's good. The lobbyists, their schedules, you tell us what schedule works for you. Like I need Tuesdays between 1 and 2. Great. You tell us that, then we find a lobbyist that can also meet during that time. Lobbyist schedules don't really get set until like December because they have to wait for the committee schedules to get out, and the legislature, as much as I ask them to do not follow my schedule, even though I want it to be set now so I could work it for you guys. They don't listen to me, unfortunately. You'll meet with your lobbyist to set goals. You'll discover who your senators and representatives are. And this is a hyperlink because there is a lesson plan that goes along with that. That's very easy to discover who your senators and representatives are. And it's a plug and play lesson plan there. We also have a whole program, and you can see just a screenshot of it right here, called On the Issues, which every year we have legislative pages who will come up with questions and on certain issues. And then we'll ask the committee chairs and the ranking members, so you have a Democrat and a Republican answering their questions on this particular issue. This can help students really figure out kind of what they care about. And we have issues from everything from the environment to community safety to youth care to education, K through 12 education, to higher education, to transportation, from everything. And so you can have students watch these. They're like 5 minutes long. So it's a great way to like split it up, do like a jigsaw in your classroom and be like, you watch the one on transportation, you know how a jigsaw works. Anyway, and so and then that can help them brainstorm, like, what are they actually interested in? Because sometimes I know that when I would ask my students, like, what are you interested in? They're like, I don't know, nothing. So this can help them kind of have that there. And then you could brainstorm those topics with your students, and then you share them with your lobbyist. The lobbyist goes through the stuff and figures out. So then you get into the first meeting with your lobbyist. So this is a 2-week this slide is for 2 weeks. So you have your first meeting. Generally, this is what you talk about. The lobbyist explains what it is they do, because most people have no idea what a lobbyist is, except for these preconceived notions of the fact that they like eat dinner with people and take their money and are unscrupulous people, right? That's kind of your general interpretation of a lobbyist. If you know what one is, it is. Where do you find the short videos? On our website, and I'll also share this slide deck out with you, and they're hyperlinked on there. So that'll be easy here in a moment. And then in this first meeting, this is where you'll introduce to your students, and your students will talk with your lobbyists about potential bills to follow. I always like to prep a few students to talk, right? Be like, you're going to be the one to talk, because or else sometimes it could just be this like fire hose of information, and that's a little boring for your students. So giving at least a few voices if possible. And then in between the meetings, so they're about 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks, you can use these some of these lessons here to look at the bills that the lobbyists have suggested and help the class vote on what bills you want to follow. I would narrow down your topics to 3 bills to follow, because one of them's going to die at least. And so if one dies, you want to be able to pivot to another one, because again, it's really depressing if you have your students are like, you get them all riled up. You're like, I love civics and legislation's so cool, la 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 la. And then 2 weeks in, nothing is at a hearing, and you're like, well, crap. So it's good to have a few to like pivot to. So that's kind of your first couple weeks. But again, like I said at the beginning, this is all very flexible. So if you want to do something different, more power to you. Like I do not care. I just want your students to understand that this stuff exists and to give them the resources to look at it on their own. The next week would be the next time period would be your meeting 2. So your lobbyist will update you on the status of the bills that you've chosen. I won't know what that is. Maybe some of them will still be in their committee of origin. Maybe some of them will have already gone through a floor debate. It's hard to say because it really depends on what bill you've chosen. The lobbyist will answer your student questions. And these can be questions of, well, what is the Republican Party saying about this bill? What is the Democratic Party saying about this bill? All the way to, I looked at this bill and on line 7, it says this. What does that mean? So it's a wide variety of questions, and the lobbyists will be able to answer those because, again, they're experts in these topics. And then students can start formulating ideas on what things they might want to testify and run those ideas by the lobbyist. They're like, well, I think that I might say this. And the lobbyist will be like, that's a really good idea. Here's something that you might add to it. Or here's how, oh, I wouldn't say that. Make sure that you address them in this way, or, whatever they happen to say. And then in between meetings, we have a bunch of resources that will help your students understand what they're going to be talking about and what the bills are doing. So all of these different videos right here, these are all videos. They're all about 5 minutes long. So they're great kind of bell ringers for the classroom. They talk about, what does a committee chair do? What is a committee? What is the difference between fiscal committees and regular committees? And these are ways to kind of supplement what the lobbyist is already talking about. And again, they're like between 5 to 7 minutes. And they are, well, when you watch them, you'll see that like you get me. So I'm explaining some stuff, but then also I'm interviewing legislators, lobbyists, committee members. So you get to hear straight from the mouth of the people who are doing the things. So it's not just a teacher like talking to them, although you get a little bit of me as well, but more you're getting it from the actual person. And then also in between meetings, you can watch the public hearing on your chosen bill. And again, that's where you can ask us to help you get those clips for you. Throughout the next, so then you get to your next meeting number 3. The lobbyist will update you. Right? That's kind of when we tell the lobbyist to give like a 5-minute start off with like, here's what's going on in the legislature, and give you kind of an update on that. They're going to answer any questions, right? What did they see during public hearings or executive session or floor debates, kind of update you on what they were paying attention to. You guys can discuss strategies and then do some more brainstorming on testimony. They can also write letters. Maybe you have students who are not interested in standing up there in front of a legislator, which can be a little like alarming sometimes, but they can also submit written testimony, which can be just as impactful. And then after that meeting, in between the other meetings, we have some other kind of videos, as well as some examples of what to put in a letter from a lobbyist, and some other videos on like what's happening during this time period, like between February 9th and February 20th. That's when bills will be going to the floor of the House or the Senate. So we have a video on how does stuff actually work on the floor of the House of the Senate? Because or else when your students go to watch what happens on the floor, what they're going to see is something like this. They're going to start reading the bill, and then the lieutenant governor is going to say, last line, and then they're just going to bang the gavel, and they're going to skip the reading of the whole bill. And what is even going on? And so the video will help students contextualize what they're seeing. And they'll hear directly from the Lieutenant Governor, Denny Heck, about what he's doing and why that's important. That video is a lot about decorum and why it's important to be respectful of one another while on the House floor, which, we don't always see. But you do see it most of the time here in Washington State. Meeting 4. kind of the meetings with the lobbyists will kind of follow a traditional path. But what I put here in this slide deck and also in the teacher's guide is kind of what is happening at the legislature at that time. The legislature has a series of cutoff dates. And so things have to happen at certain times. And so whatever the lobbyist is talking about is going to correspond to those cutoff dates. Some of the things that I think as you're getting later on into the session is discussing strategies, not just the bill itself, but maybe why is this bill not moving forward, even though it seems to have support of the majority party? Like they can pass it, why aren't they? And then the lobbyists can really talk to your students about what those strategies are, getting that kind of inside track. And then we have a few more videos, again, that kind of will help contextualize what the lobbyist is talking about. You can start thinking about how the bill has changed. Amendments will happen. By this point in time of session, if your bill is still alive, it has moved from its house of origin to the other house, so from the House to the Senate, Senate to the House, and it will have changed, most likely. And so why does it change? Well, there's a whole host of reasons why it could change. And so your lobbyist will be able to talk you through those things as well. Oh, it says meeting 2 there. Anyway, typo on my slide, sorry. This would be your last meeting. This is the final steps. Maybe your bill has already passed through this time, Maybe your bill has died. Maybe you've pivoted to looking at something else. But your lobbyist will share these final steps, looking at what your students might be able to do in the interim. So March 12th is sine die, the end of session. And so then we enter into the interim, which is actually where your students can really get involved with their legislators, because during the legislative session, like you're lucky if you get a 15-minute interview with a legislator. So it's during the interim when they're back at home and they have a little bit more time to work with stuff. This is a great time to like kind of encourage your students to be involved in that way. We have a video on what the governor can do, all of the different options, and then students can brainstorm of what they're doing, what they want to do now the legislation has passed. The last thing that I want to tell you about, I talk so fast, but I can answer any questions as well, is our supplementary resources. So our flagship program is this Capital Classroom program. It's been running for almost 15 years now. And we've done a lot of really wonderful things, had legislation that has been proposed by students, passed into law, that's still active today. We've had legislation proposed by students, testified on by students, and didn't pass the legislature, but they still had a really great learning experience of how that actually works. That's our flagship program that y'all are hopefully, here to be a part of. But we have a lot of other video resources that are available. Most of these resources have customizable lesson plans that go along with them. So they're plug and play, but also they're on, Google Docs. So you could delete and add whatever you'd like that will work for your classroom. And so on the left-hand side, you see there's the Judicial Branch Explained. That is the series of videos that we're working on right now. We have 5 out already, and we're putting out more throughout the fall. And so these are answering common questions that people have about the courts. So we have a video on what's the difference between a civil and a criminal case. What's the difference between a prosecutor and a public defender? And we talked to a prosecutor and a public defender. So again, you get the straight from the mouth of the people who are actually doing the work. And then we are also putting out videos on the levels of courts. So right now, right before I came on this call, I'm working on our video on juvenile courts. So how does the juvenile justice system work? And all of these videos, all of them here, are 5 to 7 minutes long. So they're really digestible as well. Our On the Issues set, I already talked about. The thing that I wanted to mention, though, is that we do new On the Issues episodes every legislative session. So starting in January, each week, we will have a new episode coming out on a specific issue. So each week is a different issue. I think I'm starting this session with K through 12 education. And so the legislative pages, which are students 14 through 16, if you haven't investigated the legislative page program, I would strongly encourage you to do so. You can find it on the ledge.wa.gov page. It's not my program, so I'm not going to do too much pitching, but it's great. And then your students would get to work with me as well. And I go and I teach the legislative pages about a certain issue and about the committees that cover that issue. They write questions, their own questions, and then we take them to the ranking member and the committee chair of that committee that deals with that issue, and then they answer them. And we at TVW are committed to nonpartisan gavel to gavel coverage, meaning that we take those questions to the legislators, we tell them they have 3 minutes to answer the question, each of them, and then we don't cut their answer. We just let people see what they said. And so those on the issues episodes are phenomenal, I think, for students to really see what each of the parties are saying on questions that are coming from them. And so we have a 2024 issues that are already done, obviously, because it's not 2024 anymore. We have 2025 issues from last legislative session, and then 2026 will come out every week. And so there'll be fresh, new things that they're talking about. We have a whole series called Elections Explained that, well, talks about elections, as you might expect. But like I said, we have a whole video on initiatives, on the top 2 primary, on how elections work in Washington State. We have one on security of your ballot, on how voting works, on recounts and how they work. And so those are all there for you as well as we're moving into election season. This Capital Classroom Plus, that's those videos that I was talking about before about how the legislature works. So on floor debates and on committee chairs. We have a whole series of other civics videos, like on the statewide elected offices. So what does the governor do? What does the commissioner of lands do? What does the lieutenant governor do? Nobody knows. No, I mean, he does some things, but it's a pretty fluid job. There's a lot of different things that Denny could be doing. And so those are all there as well. And then this picture here at the bottom is called Legislative Review. This is put out by TVW. It's not part of our Teach department, but it is put out every day during the legislative session. It's a video, but it's also available as a podcast. I would say that it's about 10 minutes long, and the host of this show goes kind of in depth of like what happened in the legislature that day. Sometimes your bills, the ones that you've chosen, are covered in that legislative review. If they are, we will like tell you and we'll be like, here's the link. But if you're just interested in just kind of having a background of like, all right, this is what happened, that's a great thing to just like catch up with on your drive to work. It's, like I said, it's available as a podcast as well. And so these are just some of the supplementary resources that we have that supplement this immersive experience of Capital Classroom. And so the last thing is that if you sign up for our newsletter, if you're not already on our newsletter, that QR code will take you there. And then what you'll get is we put out a newsletter every week during the legislative session. And in this newsletter, one, you'll get our on the issues that we produce that week. You'll get we put out a new legislature explained episode. So this year we're going to be we're going to be explaining how caucuses work. So what does the Republican caucus and the Democratic caucus do? What does that even mean? What is that word? And we'll like explain those things. We're going to be, talking to the communication staff. What does the communication staff do? How did the parties communicate, even what they do? Things like that. Those will come out in the newsletter. So if you sign up from the newsletter, you'll just like automatically get them. Any new content, all of our judicial branch stuff that is really focused on the rule of law and why the rule of law in our democratic society is an important thing to have. And so we've been interviewing judges, prosecutors, public defenders, other lawyers and other judges all summer, really focusing scholars on these particular issues. This all comes out in the newsletter. So if you sign up for the newsletter, you get all the information. So now I'll just go think, sorry about this. So our Capital Classroom program is what you're here for. I hope that, we have you all signed up, I assume, most of you. And really the only thing that we need from you kind of at this moment is like, yes, get me my lobbyist. And then we will then be working with you one-on-one. So you'll probably get some emails from Jessica about, here's how, let's get your schedule, right? Knowing when you can meet with the lobbyist, that's important for us, obviously, and for you. We'll get you your camera sent out to you, your microphone. If you're new to the program, we'll have you do kind of a tech run through with one of us so that when you first have your first meeting with the lobbyist, it's not like, we can't hear you. And then 20 minutes later, the lobbyists, they're also very busy. So they don't want to deal with 20 minutes of tech time, as the case may be. So we'll do all those things before January. That's why we kind of have this early in October. So any questions that I can answer? I know I just talked like a lot. I'm sorry. I miss being in the classroom. So I get like people to like listen to me and I just jabber. Well, then that was 45 minutes of me talking. I'm excited too. My email, and I'll just put it in the chat for you in case you don't have it, but is corey.paulson@tvw.org. And you can email me at any time, and I'll get back to you with any like minute question that you may have or large expansive question that you may have. I have teachers who, what does it mean to be on the wait list? It just means that we haven't paired you with a lobbyist yet. And we just needed you to say, yes, I want a lobbyist, and then we'll get you a lobbyist. So we just need, we need the like, yes, I want one, essentially. Because we have to say you're on the wait list until we actually get you one. And so anyway, the questions, like I've had questions from, how do I do this or how do I find this video, to can you explain to me what this concept means or what they said here, or can you contact me with this person? All of those things, that's what I'm here to do. It's, why I left the classroom, is to make your experience with the students more valuable, and so that you can spend your time inspiring the students rather than looking for videos on TVW and have that information so that I can help you with that. So my students are 2 for 2 on bill passing. Nice. That's good, because like I said, I went 10 years and I think I was like maybe 5 for 5 on that. So great. Jess is recording this information. I'm going to, I'll send all y'all the slide deck that has the links in there as well. And I've been recording this meeting as well, and I'll probably just send that out to you as well. Not that you want to re-watch this meeting, but if you do and you forget some of the things that I said, you certainly can. So thank you all for joining me at the end of your day. I ended 15 minutes early. That makes me a winner. Talk to you later.